Winnipeg Jets trade talks are really starting to escalate as a new report has dropped from Elliotte Friedman revealing some very interesting trade details surrounding the Winnipeg Jets. We're going to break down those reports and discuss what this means as Cheveldayoff prepares for something big. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. If you're a part of the 93% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jets content. And over on Hat Trick HQ, we're getting very close to 10,000 subscribers. So make sure to hit the subscribe button over there as well. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, and thank you for that. But Darius, more Winnipeg Jets news to go over today. There's been a lot of reports and rumors circulating surrounding the Winnipeg Jets and then making a trade, of course, as the deadline inches closer and closer. It's a bit less than a couple months away here, but there is some talks, and today it's going to be focused around a team that are surprising sellers. At least all signs point to them being willing to sell some of their and trade some of their players, sell some of the players. So Friedman on 32 Thoughts podcast said, I think that there was a guy that was available, although I don't see it, that teams would be climbing up buildings to go get. It would be Trocheck. If he was available, teams would be going for it to get him. But again, he has control. So a few different things here. And the reason we bring this up is because the Jets have been involved in a lot of different trade talks. And whether that in this case is going to be Trocheck of the Rangers, a bunch of other players as well, whether that be third line centers, or obviously Adam Larry's there, but centers, wingers, depth pieces, everything. The Jets are going to be active in these talks, and you can see this right here. This is exactly the type of move I could see Chevy making, Perfetti, Trocheck, Ehlers. And when you're looking at the Winnipeg Jets, we know Kevin Cheveldayoff is not afraid to go big at the trade deadline. We saw it last season. It didn't pan out. They went for Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan. Although not massive moves at the time of the deadline, Sean Monahan was one of the most valuable pieces that the Canadians had to trade. They obviously traded. They got a first-round pick, and then they also got Tyler Toffoli for a pretty high draft pick as well. Obviously not a first, second. I believe it was a third. Either way, now Darius, as the Jets prepare for they're one of the best teams in the NHL, Trocheck could be an interesting name, and we'll dive into some trade scenarios here in a minute. But what are your thoughts on this move?
And we'll dive into how it looks like with the rest of the lineup and what the lineup could look like. But a line like this is pretty exciting, right? If you think of Perfetti, if he's really playing well, and again, he's had an up and down, hot and cold season, but if he's playing well with a guy like Trocheck up the middle and Ehlers, that's a crazy line heading into the playoffs. And in Trocheck, you would get a guy who knows how to play in the playoffs. I think he's a heart and soul guy for the New York Rangers. So the question at this point, we can address it right off the top here in the video, is he available? I'm not too sure. I think the Rangers actually want to make this guy their captain, but I think with the way that the Rangers have played this season and the fact that they are getting older, I'm not so sure that anything is off the table. If the Jets come to that team and that team is out of a playoff spot at the trade deadline and say, hey, we'll give you X for Vincent Trocheck to really bolster up our center depth and lengthen our lineup, I wonder if there's a trade that could be done there. And this is a team, or two teams, I should say, that are pretty familiar with each other. Obviously, the Jacob Trouba trade went down just a couple years ago as well. So I think this would be a very interesting option for the Winnipeg Jets because, when you look at their lineup, and we'll look at it in a second, really get into the lineup and how it could fit, they're probably looking for a centerman and a defenseman at this point. We've been talking about defensemen a lot, but I think they could use some center help as well to really bolster the top of their lineup. And again, I think the Rangers highly covet Trocheck. I think they actually want to make him their captain, but I don't think any pieces in New York are off the table right now, especially if you bring them a pretty good offer.
Yeah, and if you think about, obviously, you can see the report from Friedman here. This is exactly the type of move I could see Chevy making. And again, this is interesting. And if the Jets overwhelm, let's say the New York Rangers with an offer, they definitely would have to consider it for Vincent Trocheck. But even if it isn't Trocheck, players of this caliber would be a perfect fit for the Winnipeg Jets. And realistically, there'll be some other players that we didn't expect to be available. I mean, if you told any Rangers fan or Jets fan for that matter, but at the start of the season that Vincent Trocheck would be a guy the Rangers are potentially even remotely hinting at shopping, you'd think that the Rangers were going to be buyers. They were going to be going for obviously a Stanley Cup, all these things, and they fell off. So as you look at the roster now of the New York Rangers, and there's a lot of different guys here. Obviously, you have Panarin, you have Trocheck, Lafreniere, Zibanejad. We've heard some rumblings about Zibanejad on some other teams being traded as well here. There's a lot of guys on specifically the New York Rangers because of how good of a team they are on paper, and obviously they're severely underperforming. The Rangers can get some very good assets, and if they want to retool, they have Chris Kreider as well. If they want to retool, this would be a time to do it. And if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you look at the Jets lineup and seeing how it fits here. We can dive into what a package may look like. It would be, picks, obviously, and even maybe players as well. It becomes very interesting. If they somehow are able to pull this off, and let's say over the next couple weeks or even the next month or so, the Rangers continue to free fall and they say, okay, we're getting great offers for Vincent Trocheck. Let's go ahead and trade him. The Jets have to be lined up, number one, to try to acquire this guy, especially with how their team is being. And, of course, getting a huge profile first liner in theory, he'd play second line on the Winnipeg Jets on a team like that is it would be very good, especially on the Jets team that doesn't necessarily always get the highly coveted free agents out there.
So a very interesting thing I think with the Winnipeg Jets and the New York Rangers is the fact that they could be very good trade partners right now. If you look at the New York Rangers lineup right here, one guy that's missing is Zach Jones, a really promising defenseman, a young defenseman who's not getting into games. He's getting healthy scratch, and he doesn't necessarily want out of New York, but he wants to play, and it looks like they could be shopping him. So I think that the Rangers could help the Jets in finding both of their pieces here, and a move that could include maybe Zach Jones and Vincent Trocheck. Now, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, you're probably going to have to give up quite a bit in terms of draft picks, but it would really make you that much better. Maybe Heinola goes the other way. This is a guy that's kind of bounced around the system for a long time. Jets fans really want him to get an opportunity. I still think that he should get an opportunity to play consistently, but it's just not happening. So maybe this is a situation where you kind of swap prospects that are somewhat similar in a way, but a change of scenery might do them good. And I think Zach Jones has real high upside, right? I think he's a really good defenseman for the New York Rangers. He's just not getting into games. So I think there's a scenario here where the Jets, through one trade with one team, can fix two problems at once. Not even problems, just bolster up the lineup heading into the playoffs here with Zach Jones, who's a guy I think is ready to explode at the NHL level if he's given consistent minutes. And he's been really good. One of the best defensemen on the Rangers when he gets into games. It's just Peter Laviolette does not trust him because he's a young player. But I think it's very interesting for the Jets. They could really solve some problems there. Now, in terms of salary cap, I mean, Trocheck makes $5.6 million or just north of that. So you're going to have to make the cap work as well. That's something we haven't really discussed yet in the video. So that's something they're going to have to look at. But, a lot of GMs are getting creative now. You can get 3 teams involved. You can really get creative here and make a move work if you want to. And in terms of going back the other way, I mean, again, probably draft picks, maybe something off the roster like Heinola, which is technically not even off the roster at this point. So I wonder if the Jets just really try and go bold at this trade deadline because they know that this is a special team the way that they're playing right now.
Yeah, I mean, to make the salary work without giving up regulars, that because you'd assume in a trade like this, the Jets would want to keep most of their team intact. And you look at the salaries on the Jets side, I mean, immediately, players that make similar salary, you're talking about, Iafallo, Niederreiter, those type of guys are not going to trade Lowry. They're not going to trade Velarde or Perfetti or any of the top 6. So, I mean, maybe in some deal they include Niederreiter or Iafallo to some degree to help match salary. But I think a more realistic option would be a third team, some cap retained, something like that. And focus would be prospects, whether that be Ville Heinola. I mean, let's not forget, the Jets also have some very highly touted prospects in their system as well. Now, whether that be Braden Yeager, there's a lot of other guys as well. Brad Lambert we saw briefly with, of course, the Jets. So maybe
Obi Barlow as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. So maybe the Rangers would prefer a package of picks and one of Yeager, Lambert. Obviously, Lambert's not highly touted as Yeager, who they got, of course, in the deal from McGroarty there with the Penguins. But ultimately, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think if they make a deal for this, the only way it gets done is if, I don't think just draft capital is going to be enough, because for them to be overwhelmed with an offer to give up their, at this point, first line center, second line center, it would probably be a package including one of their top prospects, and probably Braden Yeager would be the headliner, at least if I had to guess, alongside salary cap. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, it would have to be something pretty significant for Vincent Trocheck. Because again, if you look at his stats this season, he's putting together a pretty good season on a team that hasn't been that good, right? Like they've been struggling a lot, 29 points in 42 games so far this season, and he logs a lot of ice time. And yes, he's getting a bit older, but this is a guy I think can help you, tip this team over the edge and try and win a Stanley Cup. So I think it's a pretty good option for the Winnipeg Jets. It solves, again, I don't really want to call it a problem. If the Jets go into the playoffs with the roster as is, they could find success. But I think if you really want to bolster 2 of those spots that we've been talking about, the center position, really lengthen the lineup, and then obviously adding another defenseman, I think the Rangers could be a very interesting trade partner.
Yeah, and I'll also be clear, I'll bring up stats one more time. I don't think that the Jets should trade Braden Yeager for Vincent Trocheck, but I think for the Rangers to be overwhelmed enough to trade him, it would be something of that nature. But let us know down below what your thoughts are on that. Let us know, do you want Vincent Trocheck if you are a Jets fan? And also, do you want to make this deal in general? Thank you guys for watching.